Hi, I'm Joanna, and in this video, I want to share with you a piece of wisdom, a piece of guidance from my spirit team, Avalon. And in fact, what I'd really like to do is make this the first of a series that I'm hoping to call the Wisdom of Avalon, so that I can share these pieces of guidance with you regularly and show you how I implement them, how I use them, and how they really have an impact on my life. Because I have found that a lot of messages from spirit, a lot of guidance that we receive remains unused. I think it's just really easy to file it away in a folder called "This is interesting," and then just go about your life in the usual way without actually making any changes or implementing it or actually using it. And I think a lot of the guidance that's sent our way is supposed to make our lives better in some way, and it wants to be used. It is given to us so that we actually use it, so that we actually implement it. And yeah, and so that's what I want to share with you in this hopefully series, and certainly in this particular video now. So first of all, let me introduce Avalon. If you don't know who I'm talking about, this is the spirit team that I personally work with. I don't think I am the only one who works with this particular group of spiritual entities, because I have people coming to me pretty regularly and saying things like, "Oh, I got a reading from someone else who channels Avalon." And I'm always really surprised because I think of them as my personal team. But in fact, I don't have a monopoly on them. So you may have heard about them before in somewhere else on the internet. And yeah, I call them Avalon. Their full name, I suppose, is the Avalon Collective, just to show that there are not one entity, they are a group of entities. I kind of see them like a council of elders, a wise council. And I'm not actually sure that Avalon is their actual name. I think it's the name that they have me call them because that particular name has a meaning to me. It evokes certain things within me. And so it's kind of like the essence of our relationship. But in any case, the Avalon Collective, and for short, Avalon, is the spirit team that I work with. Now, when I started working with them over 10 years ago now, I asked them why we were working together, like what we were supposed to do. And they told me that our mission was to bring magic and power back to the individual. So to that our work was to empower people, to help them find that self-belief within themselves, that they can have some kind of, not really control, but some kind of influence over their lives. So some people call this manifesting, and in a way it is. However, what Avalon have taught me about manifesting is slightly different, goes slightly deeper than a lot of the things that I have come across in other places. So I don't always use that word, but yes, it is essentially our mission is to bring back the magic and power to you so that you can shape your life into a life that is more aligned, that is more in tune with your soul path, so that you are actually living what you came here to live, the path that you came here to follow. So I work with Avalon really, really regularly. I talk to them every single day, both for myself and for various clients and various services that I provide. I do a lot of readings. I also channel a message from them every single Friday, something that will help you to stay on track, stay on soul path, stay in alignment, and to pursue the things that are really, really right for you, the things in life that are really right for you. And if you want access to that, then I'll leave the link in the description below. It's called the elevator. So click on the elevator link and you can find out more information about that. I use that message every single week myself as well. It's just a really good guide to creating more of what you want. So it always highlights something to focus on, or something to think about, or something to reframe. And I find it super useful myself. And as I said, I have other opportunities to talk to Avalon every single day as well. So I get a lot of guidance from them. I'm very greedy with the guidance. And yeah, and so today today I want to share with you a particular piece of advice, a piece of wisdom that they shared with me or with us many, many years ago now. And they keep repeating it regularly because it's one of those things that we tend to forget. And the piece of wisdom is really more like an exercise. So simple, really, but so easy to forget. And it's essentially being willing to ask yourself how you would approach your goal from a completely different direction, in a completely different way. So, this is really an invitation to do things differently. So this comes in useful when you feel like you're doing all the right things and nothing is working. You're not getting where you want to be. You're not seeing as much progress as you'd like to see. Like that frustration of you're doing it. You're doing what you feel like you're supposed to be doing, but it's not working. Like it's not leading to anything. And the first time that Avalon shared this with me, I was in this very frustrated place. My goal that I was working towards was growing my business. And I was doing all the things, I was doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing in terms of business growth and marketing and whatever else. And I felt like I wasn't getting the results I wanted. I had some really big goals and I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted. I also wasn't super enjoying what I was doing. So, like in terms of the business growth, all the activities that I felt I had to do in order to grow. And so, yeah, I ended up in this really frustrated place where I felt like I was working really hard, doing the things that I didn't super want to do, but that I was told would work, and still they weren't working. And that's when this message came in, to try and do it differently. So the exercise was and is to think about what goal you're working towards, to write out like how you think you're going to get there, like what you think you need to do, what path are you on towards your goal, what you think the steps are towards achieving your goal, and then to challenge yourself to think of a completely different way of doing it. And in fact, it's useful to even ask yourself what the opposite way of doing it would be, even though like there might not be an actual opposite to whatever steps you're taking, it might spark something within you. So for me, in that first situation where this piece of guidance came up, it sparked in me a memory or a realization that I wanted to be a blogger, that I wanted to be a content creator, that I wanted to spend my time writing posts that were helpful. I used to have this vision of people sharing my posts with friends, because they found them so interesting or so helpful or so useful, And that's what I wanted. However, I wasn't spending any time on any of that because I was constantly trying to grow my business in the usual ways. I was constantly trying to do marketing campaigns and advertising and like businessy things. So I wasn't doing any of that writing and creative stuff that I wanted to do. And so when I asked myself that question, how could I do it differently? How could I proceed in a totally opposite way? That's what came up for me. And because I was so frustrated and so desperate, really, I followed that. I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a month and not do any of the things that I think I should be doing, but I don't super enjoy because they're not working anyway. And I'm going to follow this new path of just sharing what I know and what I have learned in a completely different way. And I have to tell you that the results weren't as wondrous as maybe I wanted, like I still wanted these really big, amazing, incredible results and this incredible growth. And that didn't happen. So I'm not going to lie to you. It's not like, you follow this formula and you'll have everything you ever wanted. However, I feel like I found a more aligned path for myself towards what I wanted. So I started to enjoy what I was doing more. And in fact, I did see more growth than I had been seeing until then. And I do think that a lot of these things are about the energy behind whatever action you take. So that's one of Avalon's sayings as well, that it's not about the action, it's about the energy behind the action. And I think this was a good example of that. So I had been trying to pursue my goal to achieve it in a way that wasn't aligned with who I am and what's important to me, and what my path is, what my priorities are, what really matters to me in my life, and what I'm meant to experience and go through. And by asking myself this question of how I would do it differently, it just sparked this other piece in me, this memory of what was important, what I did want to spend my time on. And that it's not like that was a miraculous result creator, but it did put me back on track in terms of alignment, and it did bring me back to activities that were more aligned with who I am, and therefore these activities were more sustainable for me, and also they had better results because they were more right for who I am. So that was the first time that that message came up, and I will always remember that process, and I will always remember that frustration that I felt when that message was delivered, and how I said, okay, well, I have nothing to lose because what I'm doing isn't working, and so I am going to try it. And it did really help to steer me on a better path for me. Now, this message has come up numerous times over the years because, as I said before, it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to just keep doing the things that you're doing, even if they're not working. We tend to just continue with the path that we're on, and we tend to not want to try different things, probably because of fear or doubt, or because they're our actually aligned path, and that path always includes a lot more growth, and therefore it's a bit, it's out of our comfort zone, right? Because that's where the growth happens. So this message comes up in Avalon's guidance quite regularly, and I always pay attention, just because that first time was such a game changer for me in terms of how I approached what I wanted and the results that I ultimately saw from following that path that was more aligned for me. I always pay attention to when it comes up. I think it actually came up quite recently in the elevator, again, in a slightly different format, but it always reminds me of that original message. Anyway, I just want to point out why this exercise, why this one question you can ask yourself about how you can approach things in a different or even opposite way, why it's important or why it works or why it's helpful. So, one of the ways in which it's helpful is that it gets you out of that frustration place, because there's nothing worse than doing things over and over and over again, and expecting different results. And in fact, I believe that that is one of the definitions of insanity, is to be doing the same things over and over again and keep hoping for a different result. So if we want something different, if we want a different result, often we have to be willing to do something different to get that different result. So it just removes that frustration of doing it and it not going, which I think already is a real vibration booster and really worth paying attention to. This exercise also brings you a lot of clarity on what path is better aligned for you, because often when we're in this place of things not working, it's because we're not willing to do what we're actually supposed to be doing, the things that really are aligned with how we are and what matters to us and the core of our being. And as I said, it's usually because that's where most of your growth will be, and so it feels uncomfortable. But asking yourself this question, being willing to hear the answer, will give you more clarity on what that path is, because you know that the path you're on is not it because it's so frustrating, right? So it's just always really good to be honest with yourself, about what you really want and what really works for you. And if you didn't have whatever constraints you've put on yourself, whatever limits you've put on yourself, what you would want to be spending your time and energy and focus on. And asking yourself this question will give you more clarity on that. It also helps you open up to possibilities that you hadn't ever considered, or that you discounted as not for you or impossible or any number of things. And this is also really important because we get ourselves into this state where we think we know what's supposed to happen or how it's supposed to happen, and that we have all the answers, and we don't, right? Like we don't see all the possibilities. Our brains literally filter out so much stuff, and we're not aware of all the possibilities that are available to us, that are possible. It is always a good idea to take yourself through exercises that open you up to other possibilities, to something that you haven't considered or that you haven't considered as a viable option, and even to give yourself, like I did, a month to explore that option and see what happens. And lastly, it really helps you identify and break patterns. Again, we get stuck on these conveyor belts towards our goals, towards our dreams, because we think that's the way we have to do it, because we think this is the only way and nothing else is possible. And asking ourselves this question of, how could you do it differently? What's the opposite of what you're doing? This exercise really helps you to identify and break patterns of behavior, patterns of thinking. The reason we get stuck in these frustrating situations is because we repeat behaviors that are actually not aligned with us, or not aligned with where we want to go. And so asking this question about how we would do things differently really helps us to identify what we keep repeating and what maybe is no longer serving us. So I go back to this question even now when I feel like I'm doing all the things correctly, everything right, everything that I'm supposed to be doing, and it's not producing the results that I want. I ask myself this question now as well. And I encourage you to ask yourself the question. Just be honest with yourself about how you think you need to proceed in order to achieve or create whatever it is that you're aiming for. And then ask yourself, what would be a different way? How could you do it differently? What would it look like to do it differently? What would the opposite be? And you might come up with a variety of different options, and one of them might just spark something that you'd wanted to try but discounted, or had forgotten that you wanted, but that is actually a better path for you, which in fact it'll be your aligned path, your soul path, just a better fit for who you are and where you want to go. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments what this brings up for you, and I will see you in another video. Bye.